Hello, welcome to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor with Miles Hassell, MD. This is an evidence-based podcast for people who want to use lifestyle choices to avoid preventable illness, as well as to treat illness. Listeners will learn the choices that work for better health outcomes for themselves, the ones that they love, and the patients they care for. We want to see patients liberated from the burden of chronic disease whenever possible. Hello, I'm Miles Hassell, MD. I'm a physician in Portland, Oregon, and this is Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor, a podcast about things that we think will help you, your family, or if you're a clinician, help your patients. And the kind of help we're trying to provide is how to live better with less medicine, less visits to the doctors, more freedom. And so today's podcast is about, are you afraid of a virus? Call it COVID virus, call it any number of viruses. Maybe you're not afraid of virus. Maybe you're afraid of bacterial pneumonia. So what we're really talking about is respiratory infections. And right now, in the wake of COVID-19, then the most prominent ones that people think about are the respiratory viruses. But let's step back from that and think about immunity. Who gets sick? Who gets sick with respiratory illness? And how can you keep me from being one of those people? And so in terms of the things that you can do for yourself that don't involve any pharmaceuticals, that don't involve any interventions with the doctors, there's some pretty powerful tools you have, because most of the people who get sick are overweight, they have high blood sugars, they have poor diets. The data for this is on our website, greatmed.org. And you can sort of see that and identify whether what we're saying really makes sense or not. But if you want to be free of respiratory viruses, don't smoke and don't be heavy. Once you've made those two steps, and we'll talk about how not to be heavy in a moment, then you say, what kind of diet is associated with best health outcomes, including best immunity? And those appear to be omnivorous diets. So these are diets that include meat, vegetables, beans, grains, good fats, pretty much all those foods that people have traditionally eaten, small amounts of alcohol included. And so when you combine being the appropriate body weight with a good diet, that's not a bad start. There's something else that'll cut your risk, maybe by as much as 50% for immune-related diseases, and that's regular exercise. And so to wrap all this into one model for saying, you know what, I'm not going to be too afraid of respiratory illnesses out there, bacteria or viruses or anything else, because I'm going to take good care of myself. And by taking good care of myself, I'm going to do as follows. 1, I'm going to be in the habit of exercising at least once a day, if not 2 or 3 times a day. And by exercise, we really mean anything that makes you short of breath. If you're not short of breath, we don't call that exercise. We call that moseying. So you can do stairs, you can jump rope, you can do weights, and as much variety as possible is not a bad plan. Frisbee, tennis, pickleball, ping pong. Something that keeps you active, and even better if it keeps you active with somebody else, and even better still if it keeps you active with somebody else, such as running or walking, and has strategy, like ping pong or pickleball or tennis or frisbee. So get in the habit of something like that every day, preferably with another person. Next, work on your waistline. If your waistline's too big, you're at much higher risk of getting a respiratory illness. And so the ways to reduce your waistline are primarily to eat less. The way to eat less and not really being aware that you're starving yourself is to eat a lot more fruits and vegetables before you put any bite of anything else in your tummy. So before breakfast, you might have an apple or a banana, or 2 apples and 2 bananas, or a heap of celery or carrots, whatever suits you. And then you have your breakfast, and you'll eat a little bit less breakfast. Before you have a mid-morning snack or a mid-afternoon snack, you'll do the same thing. Maybe an apple, maybe a banana, maybe celery, maybe carrots, maybe something else. And you'll plan all this the day before lunch, before dinner. And so you'll be so full with fruits and vegetables, you're going to be able to eat a little bit less of everything else and not even notice. We have many other ideas for weight loss. Once again, those are in our in the appropriate section on our greatmed.org website. So we've talked about exercise, we've talked about waistline, and then we can dig a little deeper into the diet part. So the reason we recommend the whole food omnivorous style diets, and the kind of pattern that we use most is the Mediterranean diet pattern. And if you see over my left shoulder, there is a book called Good Food, Great Medicine, which is a book my sister and I wrote. It's in the fourth edition right now, and it talks a lot about how to stay well. But if we're going to sort of summarize what we're talking about, it's to follow a plant heavy but not vegetarian diet. So, your breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks all start with fruits or vegetables. You include some meat or fish or chicken on a regular basis, probably pretty much daily. You include good dairy. By that, we mean yogurt, kefir, cheese. You don't worry too much about fat. Traditional diets have been relatively high in fat, but you're only going to be eating traditional fats, which are the kinds of foods that we've already mentioned, plus extra virgin olive oil, and we use dairy fats with freedom. Now, some of you are sensitive to certain foods. You can drop those foods out and include others instead. So don't let any kind of thought that you're sensitive to certain foods make you eliminate other good foods from a whole food diet. A small amounts of alcohol appear to be associated with better health outcomes overall. And I did say the word small. So, a small glass of wine a day of 4 or 5 ounces probably is a reasonable maximum for most people. And that data is also in our book and on greatmed.org. And so when you combine all that and then think about, where am I going to get this food? Don't get it outside of your kitchen except on special occasions is the basic rule. As soon as you start eating food that's processed outside the home, the health risks go up, and we don't really know why. But there's been multiple studies on this subject, and you could, if you're interested in doing a literature search on this, it usually comes under the category of ultra processed foods. So processed foods made at home, which is like cooking, are not our concern. It's the ultra processed foods made in factories. Michael Pollan has a great comment where he says, if it's made in a plant, don't eat it. If it is a plant, do eat it. That's not a bad rule of thumb. So you get in the habit of making pretty much all of your food at home, and that can be really simple food. You can make big casseroles and eat them for several days. You can eat really simple foods, like, for example, a lunch for me might be some cheese and celery, maybe a handful of nuts. Breakfast might be a whole grain cereal that I might make a big batch of and then eat for several days with just reheating it each time, along with a handful of blueberries and a little bit of honey and maybe some walnuts. So these foods can be very, very simple, very, very economical, and it just takes that sense of priority of making this your intentions in life. When we also think about foods, sometimes the we're so busy talking about protein sources and dairy because those are controversial, and fruits and vegetables because everybody knows they're good for you. It's often ignored the role of grains and beans. So a person could actually argue from the literature that the group of foods that has the single strongest body of evidence supporting them is actually the whole grains. And when we talk about whole grains, we're talking about whole grains, the stuff that looks like it comes out of the farmer's field, that you boil or you might grind at home in your own grinder. And those are extremely rich in a broad range of nutrients, including they generally run 15 to 20% protein. And so if you take the grains and beans and legumes, not only are they inexpensive, but with a little bit of flavor, they are just fabulous foods. For bonus points, you can add a couple of other factors. We talked a little bit about dairy foods like yogurt, kefir, and cheese, and these are cultured dairy foods, and they provide a probiotic element to your gut and to make a healthier gut, because it can be reasonably argued that your immunity is primarily revolves around your intestinal tract, your gut. But there's other sorts of probiotics too. There's other cultured foods. One that we include almost daily in our diet is fresh sauerkraut. And other people might choose kimchi. It's a sort of a version of the same idea. Um, but it's worth remembering that all whole foods are essentially dirty. That means they have bugs. That means the whole foods cooked at home are right across the board a source of probiotic influence for your gut. Um, you also want to be rested. Adequate sleep appears to be really important for a good immune system. So getting somewhere in the 6.5 or 7 to 9 hours sleep a night is really important. How to achieve that for some people is really challenging. And for people that are having trouble sleeping, we often find that a bedtime snack helps. We find that a lot of exercise helps. Most exhausted people sleep well. And so say to yourself, maybe I'm just being too easy on myself. Maybe I just need to get more exercise. Um, and also, as you lose weight, you often improve problems such as sleep apnea, which is a common source of disturbance for sleep. If we dig deeper into the weeds of immunity, we often start thinking about heat and sunlight and isolation. So there's a great deal of loneliness in our society. And that's worth looking at for yourself. Say to yourself, could I be spending more time with other people? Because other people, frankly, need your help and you need their help. And so think about ways that you could visit more people, bring casseroles to a neighbor, develop more relationships if that's an area that's lacking in your life. And to doing that generally requires being selfless in some way, which has its own qualities that will benefit you. Think about sunlight and heat. So people who get midday light appear to do a lot better. And so we actually recommend that people get a little bit of light in the middle of the day, even if you have a history of skin cancer. And so what we're looking for in adults is non-burning sunlight. And typically that's going to be in our latitudes. In summer, it's going to be like 10 or 15 minutes with as many square inches of your skin exposed as possible. Um, we don't quite know why sunlight seems to be so beneficial. Vitamin D is one potential mechanism, but there's other mechanisms as well that are reasonably reasonable to propose. Heat also seems to be improved, helping immunity, and so deep hot baths or saunas, if you have those available to you a couple of times a week, can be very, very, very practical. I don't have easy access to a sauna, but I can take a deep hot bath for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes once or twice a week. The specific oils you include in your diet probably are valuable as well. The one for which we have by far the most evidence for benefit is extra virgin olive oil. And we think extra virgin olive oil is so important to include in your diet that instead of buying vitamin supplements, maybe you should buy better olive oil. And by better olive oil, we generally mean extra virgin olive oil that's made for my United States audience, made in the west coast of the United States, because we can be more sure that that is more pure. If you're living elsewhere in the world, you're going to have other sources of extra virgin olive oil. This is not an area to save money in. Get a large volume source of extra virgin olive oil so it's not horrendously expensive, but you're going to have to spend good money to get good olive oil. So, in summary, if you don't want to get sick, don't be too heavy and work on that right now. Exercise every day or a couple of times a day, even if it's very, very brief. Maybe 30 seconds with a skip rope might be twice a day, might be where you are right now. Maybe some stairs. And don't ignore the value of games. Thirdly, eat an excellent whole food diet that you primarily build at home. In other words, cook. Fourthly, some sunlight, some heat, and make sure you're getting good oil in your diet. And we would consider the extra virgin olive oil as the one that has the most benefit. Thank you.